Okay, so I'm really delighted to introduce our first ever RefugEAP Network Meet Up speaker, which is Dr. Tomasz John, who is a teaching fellow in TESOL and intercultural communication at the University of Strathclyde. Tomasz has been very active in the social justice and refugee spaces over the last few years, and he's been doing some exciting work on an MSc TESOL program that he runs, and that is the topic of his presentation today. So I'm going to now pass over to Tomasz.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for making this platform available for me. Let me share my screen with you all. Are you able to see it? Nice one. So today I want to chat with you about the research that myself and my colleague Joanna McPake are working on at the moment, where we work at the University of Strathclyde. And we kind of frame it from the teaching research nexus perspective, where we are trying to implement more research opportunities, but also at the same time research the process of implementing various elements in how to integrate teaching to vulnerable adults and how to weave in elements of trauma-informed pedagogy in our teacher training. So I just wanted you to imagine a world where research doesn't just sit on a shelf, but becomes the lifeblood of teaching practices. I'm sure you can all relate to it. Today, I want to dive into the confluence of the teaching research nexus, so the kind of gap in between research and teaching, where teaching vulnerable adults and trauma-informed pedagogy intersect. So as I open up the realm of English medium instruction and trauma-informed pedagogy, I want to kind of unlock a trove of new questions today. So perhaps there will be more questions than answers today. I think it's particularly vital because it really matters little how good the pedagogical knowledge generated by research is if no one is paying attention to it, right? So I hope that this presentation can unveil potentially transformative outcomes of this volunteering pilot program, because I think it really well intertwines the fabric of second language education and the potential real-world impact. So yeah, in my presentation, I'm going to explore the potential of that implementation, the research, and the collaborative opportunities. So just a bit of rationale behind this project. I'm sure you realize what's happening around the world. In Scotland, in Glasgow in particular, due to the ever-increased demand for English for speakers of other languages, in particular amongst refugees, asylum seekers, and forced migrants, there's a growing interest in providing specialist English language provision. And there is more and more space for specialized provision for vulnerable adults and migrant children. So obviously, we've got a lot of ESOL and EAL provisions. We've got ESOL provisions in further education colleges, but also primary and secondary schools, community centers, and charities across the city that now started to offer an increased ESOL or EAL provision, very often running without any funding from the government. So recognizing that increased demand for tailored English language provision that kind of acknowledges and addresses some of the unique challenges that these learners face, particularly having trauma or potential post-traumatic stress disorder, we decided to implement opportunities for our students to not only observe existing teachers in action and support vulnerable learners, but also develop access to potential data for students' future research projects. So far, the pilot of the project has allowed students to observe, teach, and reflect on the engagement with the various English language provisions offered by the various organizations, including the Scotland's National Centre for Languages, the Association for Ukrainians in Great Britain, Glasgow Clyde College, ESOL provision, and a number of charities. One of them was Central and West Integration Network Charity, and also the EAL teams across primary and secondary schools in Glasgow, including over 150 EAL teachers. So this current stage of the project focuses on early outcomes from the pilot program to integrate that trauma-informed pedagogy in training for students enrolled on our Masters in TESOL and Intercultural Communication program, and then volunteering to teach English to Ukrainian displaced people at SILT in particular. So the way we frame it at the moment kind of taps into Jim McKinley's teaching research nexus theory, which kind of refers to the overlap between research and into language teaching and teaching itself. And it's fundamental to this discussion because as the researchers or teacher educators and then student volunteers engage in a cycle of research training, but also teaching, reflection, research, reflective cycle. So before I will tell you more about the theoretical framework, I just want to explain the reflective cycle a little bit. So McKinley's paper from 2019 kind of captures that nexus really well because it explains the relationship, the limited and non-existent sometimes relationship between TESOL researchers and TESOL practitioners. But our current project includes the consideration of a more complex and messier reality, as you can see the different lines between the different stakeholders. So let me try to explain it to you. So the primary goal of the current stage of research is to understand how TESOL teachers can be prepared to implement the trauma-informed pedagogy in the classrooms, given that many, but not all, of our current and former students envisage working in classrooms similar to those in which they themselves learned English, largely in the context of secondary and higher education. But also a small number of our students have also personal experience as refugees or migrants. So we want to build on that. And a few have experiences of working with refugees in different contexts. So the secondary goal is to understand the complex relationship developing in the specific context in which we ourselves are working, myself and Joanna, because, you know, it was a bit unexpected to be called to support a voluntary initiative at the university. So that was done in response to the arrival of a large number of Ukrainian refugees in Glasgow in 2022. But we have drawn on others' research into the development of trauma-informed pedagogy to guide the preparatory course that we designed and delivered to our students. So in our elements of the research, we researched the experiences of our students as they volunteer to teach English in this drop-in class organized at SILT, and those of the expert TESOL teachers who have volunteered to set up and run these classes. And I believe some of them are here with us today. So Susan and Merdad, I hope you can chip into discussion later on. So yeah, our students and our teachers' reflections on their experiences have become the data for their own research, whether master's, dissertations, or doctoral thesis. So that's really interesting. So currently we are at early stages of this work, and we see other prospective lines of engagement, but we haven't fully explored them yet. And, you know, possibly our expert teachers could be also included in these discussions later on. But we have to acknowledge that, you know, everyone's very busy. We are busy professionals, and we are already taking on a lot. And at the heart of this project are also our Ukrainian students or other refugees themselves, represented here in the black box. And we are still trying to identify appropriate ways of engaging with them, because, you know, it's given that they are by definition transient or vulnerable. So it's quite complex to kind of capture that part of the research. Okay, I'm just going to give you a snapshot of the theories that we are using in our research. So as part of our preparation, students received training on volunteering amongst the specialist target groups, so Ukrainian refugees. And also they received training on teaching vulnerable adults and migrant children and how to utilize trauma-informed pedagogy in these contexts. So for those, I mean, largely, I think you are familiar with Alex's work, but in a nutshell, trauma-informed pedagogy in English language teaching refers to an approach that recognizes the impact of trauma on students' learning and well-being, and kind of seeks to create safe and supportive learning environments. So according to research, according to Alex's research, trauma can affect cognitive and emotional functioning, which can potentially hinder learning and academic performance. So as such, trauma-informed pedagogy kind of seeks to provide supportive and empowering learning experience that can help students to overcome the effects of trauma and then help them to achieve their goals. So, you know, working on sensitive practices can involve creating safe and predictable learning environment. It can provide opportunities for self-expression and choice, and it can provide opportunities to use instructional strategies that promote engagement and self-regulation. So that's a really important aspect of trauma-informed pedagogy. So by incorporating the diverse perspectives and experiences into curriculum, teachers can help create sense of belonging and promote engagement among students from these diverse backgrounds. So I would say overall, trauma-informed pedagogy is a critical approach these days for those specialized contexts, and in which English language teaching can support students' academic achievement, but also well-being. Okay, so in the next few slides, I just want to give you a snapshot of our involvement and our students' interaction with the cycle. So this kind of might offer you a clearer understanding of the integral connection and the continuous self-reflective nature of the cycle. So here on this slide, you can see our current student volunteer dissertation research project as they volunteer in the engagement in volunteering, and they kind of use access to that context for developing the master's projects. They're currently collecting data, and some of them started analyzing that data. So we can already see the fruits of the kind of impact of the training that we put into place. But we also have feedback from different former student volunteers who, after volunteering in Sylt and also on the ship in Glasgow, for those of you who don't know, for over a year, the Ukrainian displaced people were housed on a ship, on a ferry in Glasgow, because there was no accommodation for them in Glasgow. And there were almost 1,000 refugees living on that boat. So our volunteer teachers were sent to that boat to teach English to migrants there, which was an interesting experience, as you can imagine. But we managed to collect some fantastic feedback from them, and the kind of transformative nature of the whole experience is captured there really, really, really well. That's another testimonial from our current PhD student, Merdat, who's actually researching the use of drama and humor as a tool to support vulnerable adult ESOL learners. So we can also see a slightly different direction coming out from that initial training that we put into context. Another success story, kind of a proud moment for us, because last year's dissertation student, Mati, received a special commendation from the British Council for her project on exploring and mitigating foreign language anxiety amongst adult migrants in an ESOL EFL class in Scotland. So that's a kind of silver medal from this annual British Council Award contest. So that was a really nice moment for us to kind of acknowledge our attempt in researching that. But the main point of today's webinar is the 3 takeaways that we see from the kind of initial engagement and the pilot of this program. The dynamic interplay of teaching and research in TESOL, the importance of specialized training in TESOL, arguably the most important takeaway, and kind of the power of continuous reflection in TESOL, which is kind of given for granted, I feel, but it's worth repeating because sometimes we forget about it, I think. So yeah, I think zooming into our central theme, the kind of intricate dance. So Jim McKinley uses this kind of metaphor comparison of intricate dance between teaching and research in TESOL, where the potential comes alive. So I just want you to picture this cycle, starting from trauma-informed pedagogy research and then moving to its real-world application and then circling back to research. So the essence of the reflexive dance of research and teaching in TESOL is the vivid spectrum of experiences of the volunteers, the teachers, and researchers that kind of illustrate how TESOL practice can draw from a multitude of research angles. So the examples that we showed you, the research projects like the humor-centric approach from Merdad, from our PhD student, or one of our master's students' unique view on volunteers' identity, showcase how varied classroom experiences lead to diverse research explorations. So the key insight here is that nexus between teaching and research isn't just one way. It works both ways. So as much as research shapes teaching methods, I think the diverse challenges in teaching also birth fresh research avenues, ensuring that TESOL remains agile and attuned to evolving needs. And a point of reflection kind of surfaces when we step back and students upon their return share their insights, which they capture in their work, but also evaluation and discussions with supervisors. So these moments push trainers into rethinking and reshaping the training content. And it's a nod to the importance of adaptability. So this is kind of beautifully echoed in Alex's influential work in trauma-informed pedagogy, which is seeing a huge surge in online demand. I'm sure you've noticed. Let's now move on to the spotlight on an essential dimension in TESOL, the need for specialized training. And I couldn't highlight it further, because I think you see the realm of English learners is ever changing. A poignant example is the rising importance of trauma-informed pedagogy, where this is not just a buzzword, and it's a crucial evolution reflecting the needs of our learners today. So through our pilot program, I feel like we are embracing this pedagogical shift, which signifies how pivotal research is in molding the way we groom educators for this field in the future. So in essence, what's the heart of the message here? I think TESOL training isn't a rigid formula. And if you look at some of the CELTA content right now, we still teach content that was, maybe kind of interesting and relevant in the 90s, but in 2023, this is not valid anymore, and we have to do more to diversify the content of teacher training. So instead, it's a dynamic entity that transforms based on the discoveries from research, from that cycle and from teaching. So the very integration of trauma-informed pedagogy here into our curriculum kind of epitomizes that adaptability. And, our world is in constant flux, influenced by geopolitical shifts. And these global changes usher in unexpected educational needs. So I think it's our responsibility, and we must kind of swiftly respond to these real world shifts and in tandem foster research that's relevant to these emerging demands. And we must remember that at the core of this initiative, we all kind of began as volunteers, driven by passion and genuine desire to make a difference. I hope I still have time. So this is the last takeaway: the power of continuous reflection. And I'm sure I'm like preaching to the already converted, but reflective practice bridge our vast reservoir of theoretical knowledge here with the tangible on-the-ground applications. So this isn't just about enhancing teaching methods, it's about enriching the research narrative as well. So in essence, I think this cyclical reflection sits at the heart of TESOL's teaching research nexus, because it ensures that our teaching strategies aren't just effective, but they perpetually align with these evolving needs of our learners. And it's this kind of symbolic relationship where we are both absorbing and contributing to research, and that then amplifies this ability to understand and cater to our learners' needs. So we must not forget that this understanding becomes paramount when we address the intricate needs of groups such as the Ukrainian displaced people. So just to wrap up, I think the early findings, I hope that the engaging with the various stakeholders in filling the gap triggered by the teaching research nexus will not only enhance the quality of learning and teaching, but it will also affect the content of the training and enrich the research process itself. So the view is supported by the growing body of literature that contends to research and teaching are not separate, but rather intertwined and interdependent. So I just wanted to emphasize the importance of promoting a culture of inquiry in which teaching and research are mutually reinforcing, and we aim to further develop collaborative partnerships between the TESOL programs, students, and ESOL provisions providers, which can hopefully foster a shared commitment to learning and discovery. So at the moment, we are not only developing an optional practical module on our Masters in TESOL program, but we are also in talks with Glasgow City Council and the University of Strathclyde to develop a specialized master's program in EAL, where trauma-informed pedagogy could be integrated even more explicitly. So the intervention so far kind of created greater awareness of the challenges that all the stakeholders might encounter in working with vulnerable adults. And the early findings suggest that they feel more confident with handling trauma-related issues in the classroom context, and that the ongoing cycle integrating research and teaching practices allows them as well to make informed decisions about their respective learning, teaching, and research approaches. So that's me in a nutshell. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tomasz. I don't know about everyone else, but that's left me feeling really kind of excited about all of the possibilities that kind of opens up to be applied to different master's programs and CELTA programs, different initial teacher training programs around the country. Before we go any further, I'm just going to stop the recording.